let's hear from some social entrepreneurs then, slash give other people a chance to talk, because no one wants me to talk all day. You might want to listen to David's tones all day. They're a lot nicer than my slight Brummie accent. But Gib, who's going to come up in a minute, is kind of the very first social entrepreneur that David and I were actually introduced to, kind of before we even knew what the term was. So we, were invited along to Oxford University to something called the Entrepreneur Lab, which we've got some other alumni of. And we went there and said, okay, talking about profitably doing good, this is kind of, this is exciting. There's some kind of weird term that looks like it's a spelling mistake called social entrepreneurship. But, it's quite hard to conceive what a social entrepreneur is like, or what a social entrepreneur means without actually hearing from them. And Gib was actually the first person in this space that presented to us and is kind of held up, I suppose, as the most successful social entrepreneur out there, and did some really incredible things. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Gib to tell you through his story.
I can't stand still in one place, so I'll pick up the mic. Afternoon, everyone. Circle of young entrepreneurs. Circle of YI. Circle of YI. Never heard of that before. I've got mixed views, actually, about these kind of things. People like me standing up and telling you some great hero story of how well we did and how it was fantastic, and look at me. I'm sure there's a place for that, and I'm really keen to hear other people giving their stories, fresh stories, new stories. But we don't hear so much about the failures, the crisis. And in my experience, it's the crisis that you often actually learn more. So I'm going to share you a little bit of both, I suppose. What is it? Tina Turner said, we don't need another hero, so I don't want to be up here. That's before your time, probably. You heard it heard it in primary school. I'll give you a bit of both. The hero story, but also a little bit of the challenge as well. And so you're going to get sort of 50 years crammed into 5 minutes, so I'll be pretty quick. And it kind of begins like this. I grew up on a Scottish island. Grew up, 2 teachers as parents. I went into business, the dark side. I went to make my money. I went to London, down here, to make my fortune. And it was great. It was fantastic. I was working in a big consultancy organization. I had all the KPIs of success that we're told that we should all want. I had a fast car, I was in nice restaurants, I had the jet set lifestyle, a nice house. It was all quite good. That's what we aspired to. I was living the dream. But there was something missing. I was living someone else's dream. I was living the dream that we'd been told that we had to aspire to, but it wasn't for me. And to be honest, life kind of changed. People talk about, the death of a parent, or getting married, or the birth of their child, or losing their job, these big set-piece events. But actually, in my experience, it's the little things, and more importantly, how you react to them, that define how your life journey turns out. And for me, I was on the tube, the underground, on my way to a client site. This is back in 1999. And I read this article about the fact that VSO, the volunteering charity, needed more business skills, the kind of stuff that I knew about. I was a strategy consultant. I thought this development stuff was for teachers and doctors and nurses, and this was something that really jumped out the page at me. And within a year, I was in Macedonia in the Balkans. Couldn't have pointed it to it on a map, but I was there working with small businesses, 90+% salary reduction. Never been more motivated in my whole life. Leave the Porsche at home, go and do that stuff. It was fantastic. And I expected to come back and pat myself in the back. I'd done my bit of good, get back into the rat race, get back into making partner. I was just below that level. I was knocking on the door of the top level in the firm. But I got the bug. I had a drug. This purpose thing was in the system, and I couldn't get it out the system. And then during these long winter nights in Macedonia, I was thinking, how can I go beyond just me as an individual doing some volunteering work and systematize this, create an organization, a new, different business model? And so, together with a bunch of other people, we created a non-profit arm, or not-for-loss arm, as I prefer to call it, Accenture Development Partnerships. It was based on a simple premise, a sort of investment from Accenture, giving up access to its people, giving up profit on this kind of work, or people would work on typically half their salary, and clients like the NGOs, the charities that couldn't normally afford these services would buy our services rather than getting it pro bono or free of charge. They would pay maybe 20 pence in the pound on normal rates, and my job was to make the whole thing be breaking even. And this idea, if you don't sell your ideas as a bit of a tip in terms of a big thick PowerPoint deck or a spreadsheet with all the numbers and the business case, just a little press release, a press article set in the future about Accenture launching this thing. The chairman bought it, and the rest is a little bit of history, I suppose. I've stood on podiums like this talking about the successes, the hero story of how well that went. We had hundreds of projects in probably 80 countries around the world, delivered $250 million worth of services to parts of the world that had most need for business skills but traditionally least access. It was, we got awards, pats on the back, plaudits, I got a promotion, everything was good. I was really living the dream. This was my dream at this point. I couldn't have been happier. So there's your hero story. And it felt good standing up and talking about that. Now we come to part 2 of the story, where the wheels come off a little bit. If you watched, I did a TED Talk in, I think, 2013, TEDx, and you would have thought I was the last person you would have imagined would end up spending 5 nights and 5 days in a psychiatric ward in Glasgow. And that's what happened, actually. Mental health issues were for somebody else. I was normal, happy, contented, enough pay. I was, that was not for me. But here I was, in this surreal environment. It was quite bizarre. But, it wasn't your traditional burnout or breakdown. I think it was actually more of a breakthrough. Because what had triggered it was I had been in India on a business trip, and I came back with this really bad fever. And the fever triggered this kind of manic episode. And for just a few days, for about a week actually, I was going through this crazy kind of dream. You would pay a lot of money for decent drugs for this kind of high that I was on, where anything and everything was possible. I was imagining a world where, business was actually solving social problems in innovative, profitable ways, where corporate strategy was based on the wisdom of the crowd rather than the sort of minority view of markets. It was a kind of wacky, crazy dream. I kind of got excited about it. I got a bit out of control and ended up where I landed up. But it has left me with this kind of question, did I go crazy, or is it actually the system that I was trying to change that's crazy? Was this view, this vision, this nirvana view so difficult to actually achieve? And actually my conclusion is that there's never been a better time to actually bring that crazy dream to life. And I say that for 3 reasons. There is a perfect storm that we are facing at the moment, a perfect storm of 3 things. One is societal expectations are changing. Employee aspirations, people like you, are very different from what they were before. And thirdly, it's about a value creation agenda. Let me take each of these in turn. Firstly, societal expectations. Business has grown, in my career alone, it's grown just enormously. Businesses now dwarf many countries' economies. 70% of the largest economies in the world are now global businesses, multinational businesses. Controlled by the few, impacting the many. And to my mind, that is an unsustainable position. Anyone hear what Larry Fink, who's Larry Fink? He's the CEO of BlackRock. Like they are the, epitomized big capitalism at its best or worst, depending on which way you look at it. And Larry Fink says that business needs to have an embedded purpose beyond just making short-term profit. So it would appear that leopards can indeed change their spots. If Mr. Fink believes that, is that not a harbinger of what's to come? What other people, the man and woman in the street, are going to expect more of the corporations that we work in. And I expect more of the corporation that I want to work in as well. Which leads me to sort of driver number 2, the aspirations of employees. That's changing as well. Now, I know everybody talks about millennials. You don't want to be put in this group. All of you are in the millennial generation. All of you think the same way, act the same way. No, that's not true. I believe millennial actually it's not a demographic. It's actually more of a mindset, of a skill set. I'm a millennial too, Don't be fooled by this crusty face and funny clothes and things like that. I believe that, well, what we're told by our friends in Deloitte is that millennials and people like me actually want careers that have a purpose. You actually want to be doing in your day job something that might be contributing, not just to yourself, but for the betterment of society. I think that's a fair enough thing. And actually, you're prepared to vote with your feet. And what's more, millennials, and this is just a fact, millennials will be very soon 3/4 of the global workforce. And in companies like Accenture, where I used to work, it's already 3/4 of the global workforce. So that's 300,000 people, employees, out of 400,000 are millennial. So individually and collectively, I believe that millennials have a huge voice and will be a huge driver of business strategy over the next few years. And in this war for talent, where all these companies are looking to attract the very best and very brightest of all of you, can you possibly ignore what these people want? So you are the ones that are going to be driving the change. Not mine. My generation made ourselves very rich and sort of, trash the planet at the same time. It's up to this generation to actually make the difference, drive the innovations, come up with the creative ideas to actually change things through your day job. And that's where this movements like the Circle of Young Entrepreneurs or the League of Entrepreneurs and others are very, very important movements for this. So there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur. And that leads me to the third driver of change, which is the business case, which is the value creation agenda. And I think it was David that said it before, that there are these big sustainable development goals that the UN has set as our kind of target of what we as humanity want to achieve over the next few years. And you can put on the television or you can read in your apps about some of the big challenges that we face as a world. And in business, we've traditionally said, well, that's not our problem. We're making widgets, maximizing profit, giving return to shareholders. These problems are for the UN or the charities or government to actually solve. Well, I say no. My view is that these challenges are actually the biggest business opportunities in disguise, and that there is an entrepreneurial, innovative solution to each of them. How we feed and nourish the next billion on the planet, how we educate them, how we provide access to healthcare, water, sanitation, clean energy. They're just really right opportunities for business on its own or with others to innovate and drive scalable solutions. And I think that at the size and scale that business is, it's probably best placed to cut across geographic boundaries and little national agendas to actually solve these things at scale. So that's why I believe that this kind of crazy dream is maybe a possibility. I was used to being called crazy for many years when I was doing my entrepreneurial journey. You're probably used to being the odd one out, to being called, crazy as well. And many people might feel vindicated having said that to me, given where I've told you I ended up in a psychiatric ward. But I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. I do believe that that is possible, and I do believe we can get there. And I'm telling this story today, but I'm also telling it in a book that I've written. You can't determine really what happens to you. You can only decide how you react. So this experience came to me. I didn't ask for it, but I've decided to write a book to share this very personal, fairly vulnerable story. And it feels a lot better giving the hero story than the victim or crisis story. But they're both important, and I really hope that they might resonate with you. The book I've written for two reasons. One is to address this taboo that there is around mental health in the workplace. If people like me can't stand up at the stage I'm at in my career and say that this is an issue, and it's a growing issue around people that have anxiety or manic depression or really facing crisis in their work. This is a big, big problem as we get busier and busier and more connected. So let's address that taboo and talk about it and address it. And I'm lucky. My flirtation with that area was a kind of relatively brief and isolated incident. I'm as normal or as crazy as the next person now. But the book is also, secondly, talking about the mental health of the organizations in which we work. Let's talk more about that. Let's talk more about the kind of craziness of the current system. To my mind, a world of business solving social problems at scale is actually a much better reality than the craziness that we currently see in the world. So I leave you with these thoughts. I thank you for listening, and I suppose my parting thought is that yes, do find your purpose. You might feel the odd one out, you might feel a bit nuts, you might be told you're crazy, but if you find your purpose, you can do that, even if some people might think you've lost your mind. Thanks very much.